This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment coach for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now here is today's episode. Episode 82. And before we dive into today's episode, I invite you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment and see if perfectionism is holding you back. No, this assessment is not a psychological test or anything like that, but it does give you an idea about whether or not some perfectionist thinking or behaving is holding you back in your life. So go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment and see where you stand. All right, here is today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. I'm so excited about my next guest. Today, I have on Elizabeth Cush, and she is a licensed clinical professional counselor, a business owner, and a blogger in Annapolis, Maryland, where she hosts the Woman Warriors podcast, a podcast for anxious women. In her private practice, Progression Counseling, she helps men and women who feel overwhelmed, anxious, and stressed out find more connection with themselves and others, allowing them to live their lives with more ease, intention, and purpose. She's worked in the mental health field for over 10 years and is a certified clinical trauma professional. Elizabeth incorporates mindfulness and meditation into her psychotherapy work with individuals and groups. We're going to talk more about this group stuff in our conversation. So before we dive into that, Elizabeth, share just a little bit about what got you into this type of work.
Good question. So I am definitely a late bloomer. So I back in the day when you're supposed to complete college, I didn't, and ended up working in the restaurant field and all kinds of different jobs. And after getting married and having my own, starting my family, I began going back to school, doing it online, finishing my undergraduate degree, which I got in psychology, with the intention that I would get my master's in psychology and be able to be a therapist. Well, that took a while because by the time I was ready to do that, then I had another child and, life kind of got in the way. And then when it really felt like, all right, this is it, I'm ready to go back and get my master's, I had 2 kids in college. So that was really hard. So anyway, long story short, I ended up working for the local, our local hospital has a domestic violence, sexual assault program in the hospital, so that I was responding to men and women who would come to the hospital and either, report that they had had some prior abuse or some abuse history, or some current abuse in their life, and help them problem solve and give them resources and maybe get them to shelter if needed. Then, fortunately, while I was working there, I was able to go back to school, get my master's, and started my private practice just about not quite 5 years ago. So
sweet.
Yeah. And I have been doing individual therapy since then, and really just so happy that I persevered and went through.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I love the perseverance, because even though you call yourself like a late bloomer, it's like you didn't give up on what was calling you. And yes, there was some pauses in life or twists and turns, but you kept moving forward. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely something that I felt passionately about, and having experienced the benefits of therapy myself, but also I personally have a trauma history, and knowing how important therapy is for that, it really, it was something I felt pretty strongly about doing. So,
Yeah. Well, and again, I think like a lot of the women that I've interviewed, it's really the soul calling, in that you really follow through with that. It's like, hey, it's touched me, it's helped me. And so I want to do this for others as well. And because it just is in alignment with who you are. Love it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, so many of us healers are wounded healers
Mm-hmm.
and it really sort of, I think, comes into our work with our individual clients because we know how important the healing piece is and
Right.
how to get there.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I
Yeah.
want to shift just a little bit. You and I were kind of laughing before I hit record about our technology and how it can be somewhat intrusive at times. And as we're
Yes.
both introverts and wanting to do
Yes.
mindfulness work with women, share just a little bit like why you think mindfulness is truly so useful to help manage and stress and anxiety, why you do this with your clients that you work with.
Yeah. Well, it's transformed my life. So I know how impactful it can be, but bringing it into client work, I think with when you have anxiety, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're totally stressed out, you're you're really like living in your head.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about planning, strategizing either future things or things that maybe didn't go so well in the past, and you're kind of working through how it could have been different. And in that space, it's really hard to bring yourself back to the present moment, bring yourself into your body and what's
Mm-hmm.
happening right now. And it's easy to get stuck there because that's kind of our default mode of just sort of
Mm-hmm.
thinking, planning, worrying. So with anxiety, being able to step away from that overactive, maybe ruminating mind
Mm-hmm.
through mindfulness, can just be so powerful and so helpful because basically, I think we're reminding our brains and our body that we're not in that place of stress. We're sort of
Mm-hmm.
creating that place of stress to live in, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to be there, that we can live now in the moment of what's happening right here, right now, through tuning into our sensory experience.
I love that. And it really is a practice. And so, like, when we were joking about the technology of like how our phone gets connected to our computers, we're like, oh my gosh, what? Turning off all the notification because it can feel intrusive. It
Yes.
really is like I have a choice. I can get from that reactive place. But when I have a practice of mindfulness, you do a lot less reacting and
Hmm.
more responding because you've created a space within
Yes.
yourself. And that's what I think is so, so powerful about mindfulness.
It
And
is. It is.
yeah. And like you said, when we pop up into our heads, because most of my clientele are very much in their head, is like dropping into your body and letting your body, because our body tells us so much too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so that mindfulness, like you said, when you tap back into your other senses and your body is telling you, hey, this is going on, it's like, oh, well, tell me more.
Yes. Yes. Well, it was so interesting. And as you said, mindfulness is a practice. And as like with anything, the more you practice, the easier it becomes. Like,
Mhm.
not that it's like easy because it can be a challenge, but it just becomes more, I think, more like natural about
Yes.
how you approach your life. But the other day, I forget what I was doing. Oh, I just bought a new car
Mhm.
and I was trying to figure out one of the functions. I was actually in my house, but with the owner's manual, looking through this gigantic owner's manual.
Yes.
And my husband walks in the room and he says something to me, and I look at him and he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm so anxious right now." And he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't know. I feel this thing in my chest." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just sensing that there's just this feeling of overwhelm about this new car and all the new things I have to learn about it."
Mhm.
It just, it was overpowering, but I knew, like, I could feel it. Like, it just rose up in my chest. And I was like, "Oh, I'm having some anxiety about this new car."
Yeah. So you named it. Once you were speaking it
Yes.
out loud, you named it. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, it's like the world
Yeah.
shifts then.
Yes, yes. And then I was like, okay, I don't have to look at this book right now. Like, I can do this at a time when I actually have the space to sit with it sit with the
Yes.
car, figure it out. And I don't need to know it all right now.
Yes. I remember when I got my car a couple years ago. I mean, my other car was like 11 years old and it did not have a lot of gadgets to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the newer one, I'm like, oh, I got my own little spaceship. This is
It's
awesome. Oh my
right.
gosh, this is intimidating.
I know. And again, with the overwhelm of
Mm-hmm.
technology, right? There's so many things that, cars can do now and that you
Mm-hmm.
can set or not set or whatever. So, yes. But to me, that was sort of a reinforcement of my mindfulness practice that in that moment, I felt and for me, a lot of times anxiety lives right up in my chest,
Yes.
and I just felt this like rush of that anxious feeling in a moment where I was just standing in my house, like
Yeah.
looking at a manual.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
then when you name it and you recognize it, it's like, oh, I actually have a choice. Now you come from a much more empowered place versus our
Yes.
anxiety and that overwhelm, which is mostly that it's a fear base, but also like a future oriented base. And it's like,
Hmm.
but you need to know everything about your car right now. It's like, but I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was not the moment to be like, I think we were getting ready to go somewhere. So I'm like, no, I can just put this down. I can set
Yes.
it aside and come back to this later. And the anxiety was like, oh, cool. All right. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I needed you to know, that I'm feeling overwhelmed by this. Yeah. But yes, naming it is huge, huge, huge. And being okay with that happens to me sometimes.
Yes. Instead of making it wrong or bad, when
Hmm.
we acknowledge it, it's like, oh, that's what you're overwhelmed by, or that's what you're anxious about. Okay, noted. I may need
Yep.
to break it down. Or, like you said, when I've got more bandwidth, I can go back and revisit this in more depth. But right now, it's not the time for that. And it's okay.
Yes, yes, and it's okay that I got anxious. Like,
Hmm.
so, all right, that's good to know that this was feeling overwhelming, but
Yes,
I can pause and be okay with where I am and do something different.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit because I know you do one-on-one work, but you also talked about, yeah, you do group work too. So how can group work in mindfulness, how can that be? I know it's powerful. Group work can absolutely be so incredible powerful. But how does that work, or how can it be even, what do I want to say? Almost sometimes better to do it
Hmm.
with a group of people than
Yeah.
just one-on-one. How's that differ or change, or yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, there's two parts to that, I would say. One is, I think, to start, because mindfulness is, yes, mindfulness, mindful awareness, sort of in everyday life, sort of
Mhm.
bringing more of your sensory awareness to everything, each like daily activities.
Mhm.
But it's also meditation. So there is that piece of like a sitting or whatever, laying down meditation piece to being mindful and sort of enhancing that experience. And it's hard to do on your own. I think it's hard to motivate. I think unless you are really driven to, you know, be a meditator, the group experience can be really powerful. And so, bringing that, so the groups that I run are for women who are stressed out, anxious, and overwhelmed,
Mhm.
and to give them an opportunity to sit quietly and meditate together and then share that experience. That's the other piece, is to
Yes.
share what it's like. And for some, which is interesting too for me, is that like in any given group, for one person, that whatever meditation I'm doing or guiding,
Mhm.
um for one person it can be like, that was it, that's my
Mhm.
meditation, I want to come back to that, like send me a recording. For others, they're like, I could not sit still, like I was all
Yes.
over the place, my head was in a bazillion different directions. And it's all good. Like it's
Mhm.
all an experience of being mindful and being aware of what it was like for you, and that each individual has different experiences. And that's very validating, I think, for people.
Yes. And I loved that you come back to like letting the women really share what their experience was. And again, it's not a judging place of whatever
No.
your experience, because I know I can relate to the one where you're like, I was all over the place. I was moving. I'm like, oh, I can relate to that. I've been to some meditations before when I was on retreat, and it was a group meditation. The person walked us through this beautiful guided meditation. I'm like, oh, my foot is okay, it's falling asleep. Oh, my leg now hurts. Oh, my back is uncomfortable. I'm like, seriously? This is where you're going to go listen to the person's voice. Okay, I'm connecting to the person's voice. Nope, my foot's there. Okay, what is going on today? And it was just like, that's just where I was in that space in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all good, right? We're all
Mhm.
entering this space from wherever we are. And I think, yes, sharing that wherever you are that day with meditation is okay too.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's really like this myth. I hear this from so many different people who teach meditation and talk about mindfulness. This common theme from a lot of, I will call it students for lack of a better word, that they're like, but I didn't do it, quote, right. Because
Mm-hmm.
I still have a lot of thoughts coming through, or I felt really uneasy. And I've had clients that tell me, they're like, well, I can't sit still in a call. I'm sorry, so I can't do that. And I'm like, even more reason why you need to be able to practice this, because that's the
Yes.
whole thing. It is a practice.
Yeah, yeah. And some days will be easier than others for
Yes.
sure. But to me, too, there are different forms of meditation. And I
Hmm.
think with mindful meditation, it's not about clearing your mind.
Yes.
It's just about being aware when your mind gets drawn away to those worries and then making that choice to bring it back to whatever your anchor is, the breath or a mantra or sound or whatever it might be.
I love that. And it's really like you saying, there are also different types of meditation. And
Hmm.
so, like you said, there's the sitting or the laying meditation, there's the walking meditation. But it's also bringing, like you said earlier, bringing mindfulness into various activities throughout the day. So, like if you're doing the dishes, there's times where it's like, oh, a song may pop into my head, and I start singing this song because I'm like, I really don't particularly like doing dishes, but here they are. Or just
Hmm.
being mindful about whatever that task is versus
Yeah.
judging it.
Yes. Yes. And um I don't know if you've read the book. It's called The Mindful Day by, I think it's Laurie Cameron.
Hmm.
And she has, it's a neat book in that it gives you little tips like throughout your day of where you can bring more mindfulness into it.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, when you're in the shower in the morning,
Uh-huh.
as if you can bring some mindfulness to your experience of the shower. So, yes, what does the water feel like? What does my shampoo smell like?
Mm-hmm.
Where is my body in this moment? But she also says, like, just ask yourself, how many people are in the shower with you? Like, so who's in your head? Which totally like makes me laugh every time, but also I'm like, all right, get out of my shower,
Yes.
whoever it
Thank
is.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
tell people, I'm like, oftentimes the shower and brushing my teeth is where the most creative downloads come from. Whether
Mhm.
it's like, ooh, I can talk about this on the podcast, or I want to write this up for a poem, or talk to this person about X, Y, and Z, because
Mhm.
it's like, that is my quiet time. It's
Yeah.
just a space that is just like, oh, just let things go and not have a ton of other thoughts like, oh, I got to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love that reminder of, who else is in the shower? It's like, oh no, get out, out,
Right,
out.
right. Yeah, please do not be in here with me. Um, but I think too, I know, a lot of your podcast is focused on being an introvert, which
Mhm.
I too am an introvert. But I think what I love about mindfulness is it almost supports me in being an introvert,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like it gives you those moments to pause and be quiet and be with yourself
Mhm.
in ways that just feel so nourishing and healing and grounding. Mm. Yeah.
And I love how you said that too. You've articulated that. I think I've thought of it in that way, but not articulated in the way you just did. And I love that because I know oftentimes we're like, as since we prefer introversions, like you're so much up in your head and we've got this rich inner world, which is a beautiful thing. But
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it can get, people can look at it with like critical kind of feedback in the sense of like, well, get out of your head, do this. It's like, yeah, but if I'm not anxious, I'm just allowing myself that space to
Mm-hmm.
be there, to get that quietness, like you're talking about, just coming home to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And I would say um, one of the benefits that the group members will share is that it really does help you get in touch with you.
Yeah.
What one, how often you're stuck in thoughts and worries, and how you
Yep.
can shift that, but also what is it like for you when you're in that place? Like, does it make you more anxious when you're sitting worrying, worrying, worrying? And when you
Mhm.
do things differently, what does that feel like?
Yeah.
But to a recognition of how hard it can be in this culture of do,
Yes.
to just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I want to shift it just a wee bit because, we were both heart centered entrepreneurs. And so I know
Hmm.
how it impacts my own personal business and my work. And for you, I'm curious, how have you seen like this mindfulness practice that you have? How have you seen it shift or change being a business owner yourself?
That's a good question. I think it's made me less critical and more
Yeah.
compassionate towards where I am in this business journey, because I would never, ever have described myself as like a business minded person going
Mhm.
into this. But, and I think for a period of time, there was a lot of anxiety about, can I even do this? And am I good
Mhm.
enough? And am I smart enough? Do I have it all? But the sort of the mindful self compassion piece has really allowed me to say, okay, well, uh, I'm learning how to do this. I'm learning how to
Yes.
be a business person. And, am I going to get it all perfectly right? Probably not. And I don't.
Mhm.
But I'm, it's also given me some confidence to trust that I can tune into myself and hear what it is I need from my business.
Yeah. So I think that mindfulness, it also allows us to tap back into our intuition. I
Hmm.
know for many adults, both men and women, I mean, everybody actually has the ability to be intuitive, but it kind of gets knocked out of you going from childhood to adulthood. It gets
Yeah.
dismissed often.
Hmm.
And that mindfulness practice allows us to reconnect to like, oh, what is that telling me right now, or what's coming up for me right now? And when you do follow your own path, it's not about perfection in any way, shape, or form. It's the progress over perfection. It's moving through that. That's how we grow as people. And that's like you're saying, it's also how you grow your confidence level.
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
you take a chance, you take a risk. And it's like,
Hmm.
let's see what this does. Try this.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, that's what being an entrepreneur is, right? Like
Mhm.
we're taking risks, we're taking chances, we're trying new things, and a lot of times, well, sometimes they don't work, and sometimes they do, and
Yep.
yeah. But I do think you're right about the intuition piece too. Is that we really are learning how to hear ourselves and what we
Yes.
want, and what feels right.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, I'm curious before we kind of wrap up, is there something that you really like feared prior to getting to where you are today, and maybe share some ways that you helped overcome it or work through it, like something that over your past few years of this journey of being a psychotherapist and business owner and creating this mindfulness space for women and men, something that you really like, oh my goodness, and what you did to really face that.
Mm. Well, I think a lot of therapists go through this too, that like there is this self perception that I have to be the expert, that I have to
Yeah.
know all the things, or I have to have studied or taken this course or whatever. And if I haven't, then I can't teach or I can't share with others. And I've learned that even as I'm learning, I can still be teaching,
Yes.
and that's opened up a lot for me, because that, sort of imposter syndrome
Mm-hmm.
or just feeling not good enough, that with mindfulness, I think it's really helped me recognize that, we're all in different phases of this journey of learning and
Mm-hmm.
being business owners. And whether you're a therapist or just a business owner, like, you don't have to be the expert. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yes, you need to have some knowledge, but it's we all have stuff we can share.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I think it's sometimes, yes, there's like hardcore skills that you may need to open up a business
Yes.
type of thing. But like you're saying, oftentimes we can keep learning as we're moving forward and still know more than someone else who says they want to work with us. It's like you're always like that one step ahead in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. It's like, yeah, you still are valid. You
Yeah.
still have
Yeah.
skills. You still
Yeah.
know how to listen with empathy and help hold that space for people. And I
Yes.
think one of the big things too that mindfulness does is helps us lean into the unknown.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
that's really when you talk about, getting through the imposter syndrome or the not good enough, it's like, oh, let me lean further into that unknown. So I let go of those old belief systems that hold me back
Mm-hmm.
and just embrace the unknown because that's truly present.
Oh yeah. Well, and embracing the discomfort with leaning
Yes.
into the unknown, because
Yes.
woo, that can keep you stuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
The discomfort. Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's such like a fear around feeling the
Mm-hmm.
discomfort. And it's
Yes.
it's it's like remembering, I like to tell my clients, it's like, oh, just ride the wave. I'm not a surfer, but let's imagine we're on this surfboard and we've got this big old wave going. It's like
Right.
that's us feeling uncomfortable. It may feel really intense. You're not sure how am I going to land? It's like, well, you may fall off and you may tumble, but ultimately that wave will come back to the shore over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yes.
yeah, just because it's intense right now or you feel it more now doesn't mean it's a forever.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that discomfort is really what you need to kind of push you forward too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The
Yeah.
beautiful growth edge that people are sometimes like, I don't want to grow.
For sure.
It's
I've
like,
been there.
oh, yeah, exactly. I'm like, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, because growing is hard. Growing's
Hmm.
not easy. Whether it's personal growth or pushing your business to grow more, it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
but healthy too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think so much of what you do for women in the work that you do, it is being able to face fears and worries in a different space where it's not, they're not running you. You
Yes.
have the ability to, like you said from the very get go, it's like, I was reading that manual. We were getting ready to leave. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's right. I have a choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and yeah, I have a choice, and I just do have anxiety sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And do I love that? Not always, but it's usually there to tell me something that I need to
Correct.
be tuning into.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest message. It's, again, it's not making it wrong.
No,
But it's like
right.
I have a choice to tune into it a little bit. And maybe that
Hmm.
is me needing to pivot and pause for a moment. Maybe it's saying, hey, this is not the right direction for you to go. But it's like when we have the space to just explore that,
Yes,
then we can make a more informed decision going forward.
absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
I love that. Well, and again, I love the concept of group work too, of creating a very also can be a very healing place, right? When you've got multiple women together and you're in
Hmm.
this mindful space, like the vibration level changes, it goes up, but so much more healing can happen in a group setting like that because the power just changes, the energy in that room space changes.
Yes, and I am always blown away by that, and just what it feels like to be in it with them is always
Mhm.
very, very validating, but empowering too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great work. Great work. And so, again, ladies, I will have Elizabeth's Woman Warrior link in the show notes. And then also her website is progressioncounseling.com. And I'll have her social media links as well. But her free gift she has for you today, she's got a free guide to getting started in meditating. So it's going to be her website, progressioncounseling.com/guided dash meditations. And again, I will have all of our links and everything in the show notes. So if you're out driving or exercising, whatever, and you don't have access to it right now, you can go out there and get it. So Elizabeth, before we sign off, is there anything else that you wanted to share that I didn't touch upon or I skipped over or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think that, I just think that wherever you are, whoever's listening, to the listeners, wherever you are on your journey of mindfulness, like, it's good. Like, you're where you are, and there's always opportunity to grow and enhance through mindfulness. So just take it one step at a time.
Beautiful. I love that message. Well, thank you so much for being on today. So appreciate you coming on and for the work that you're doing out in our world and making us more mindful and being back into the moment versus getting caught up in the rush and hustle of things when we don't need to be all the time.
Nice. Well, thank you, Nicole. I really, really appreciate your asking me to be on your podcast.
Thank you for listening. Curious about where you stand in perfectionism? Head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment. Take that short little assessment that I've created just for you and see how you do. No right or wrong, just an assessment. Take care.